Hi, my name is Jimilia Harris. I'm a part of Andrew Zakari's social problems class at Tuskegee University. We are doing these interviews to conduct and understand how single parenthood affects those living in the day to day in the African American community. Because it is said that African Americans are suffering the most from single parenthood, illegitimacy, and cohabitation. We read that illegitimacy and cohabitation are on the rise because they have been heavily destigmatized. And because of that, we have a lot of illicit sex, violence, and illegitimacy spreading through the community. In this video, we're here to determine, and not even really determine, but to gauge the opinions of those in the community. At the end of this video, you will see a clip of me and some of my opinions on some of the questions that we received.
My name is Camilla Gaines.
And how old are you?
I'm 44.
Okay. Are you a single parent, or are you co-parenting? Are you married, or?
I'm a single adopted parent.
Carlo M. Harris.
All right. And how old are you, Mr. Carlo?
I'm 49.
And are you a single parent? Are you co-parenting, married, or anything like that?
Single parent.
Single parent. Okay.
I am divorced.
You are divorced. Okay.
Sheck Taylor, CheikhtayLor.
Good morning, and my name is Jimilia Taylor.
All right. Can I get your ages?
I am 48. Sometimes I forget. 48 years old.
And I'm 47 years old. I know when you had said that, I was like, oh, let me think about how old am I, but I'm 47.
Okay. And what is your parenting style? Are you single parents, co-parenting, married, or?
Married.
Married. Okay. Awesome. All right. If you need me to repeat any question or rephrase any question, I can.
Oh my. Well, I'll take a stab at it. And I'll also say that I think it's probably something that evolves. You know, what love is at 20 and 25 and 45 and 48, I think evolves. But I think love is responsibility. Love is a commitment to choice, a commitment to family, a commitment to an individual who you say that is my person, then I'm responsible for whether, whether it's like, whether it's dislike, whether it's changes of time or economics or what have you. It cannot just be based on a feeling of happiness, which can change at any given moment. So it has to be something that's rooted in a commitment and obligation, in my opinion.
I agree. And just to kind of add on to that, it also too is relationship building and being intentional about meeting the needs of each other. Because, my love language could be totally different than Sheck's love language, but having an understanding of what his is and him understanding what mine is speaks volumes and really does help in the relationship and build the relationship as you move forward. Like he stated, there will be times to where, it's good, bad, and the ugly, but that's all a part of evolving together and knowing that you have one another's back. And those times when I may be down and he's up, it's a give and take. type of relationship to be able to really embrace what love truly is and how you love one another.
I think love is selflessness, openness, always willing to give yourself to that other party, and as well that other party should be, it should be reciprocated. Um, Love is also knowing yourself through understanding you, understanding what you want, understanding that you should always be open to that other side, to let them know and grow with you. So, love is also, as I said, selflessness, but the understanding of how much you really love something that you have to sacrifice, that you are willing to sacrifice for that and the greater good. So,
What would make love, as you define it, last so that there would be a successful or stable marriage?
I think first you have to understand yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be true to yourself, and you have to know yourself that whatever fears, anxieties, or past that you have to deal with that first to make it successful with the other side, because you have to be open with the other side. You have to communicate, and it needs to be the same for the other side too. Um, I think that far as any relationship, uh, the boat is missed because it goes from straight into the voyage, not the checking in, not the sitting of your bags to the side, and it just starts off on the cruise. And in the cruise, you find out different things that you probably should have knew that in the check-in process and the baggage process. So for any relationship to last, and should understand, it should be understanding too at the basis of all of this, is that you must understand this person and realize that that person grows and that person changes, and you got to be willing to do the same.
Cohabitation, I believe, for some people it works. I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer. So for some, cohabitation works. It depends on what your goals are, what your religious beliefs are, what you hold near and dear to your heart, and what the ultimate plan is, and how y'all are going to work towards that plan. Cohabitation in terms of parenting, I believe there need to be very well defined boundaries and an understanding of, should we go our separate ways, how will this look and play out for our child? How will we continue to make this work? How will we continue to be a family without without being under one? So I don't think it could, only way I feel like it's harmful to the child or to the individuals is when there aren't actual goals for parents, because parenting is the priority. If y'all are just going to cohabitate, or not just cohabitate, because it's not just, if y'all are going to cohabitate, you need to have boundaries when it comes to parenting and a plan for if you choose not to be together. I do feel it plays a role with some individuals, but I do believe that's the minority. I believe that's the minority because you can have a two-parent household and raise or even if you don't raise them to be that way, have teens that tend to gravitate towards violence or looking to validate themselves through sexual partners and not protecting themselves and using protective measures and bring a child into this world. I don't think it it gets to define us as individuals as much as society wants it to, because they want to place blame. They want to funnel certain monies into different places to push their agenda. I sincerely believe the thing that helps the most is the village you place around your children, the village you put around your relationship, the people you allow your circle. That that is very key to um to have teenagers that move in a different direction, because they have more people to be accountable to. They have more people asking them and asking them, how are you doing? How is school going? What are your interests? I'm going to come see you play in the next game, or I'll be there at your award ceremony. I believe that is more important um, than how they came into the world.
Single parenthood, uh, I think about it is what it is at this point because I'm a single parent. I feel like that it's possible. I feel like it's definitely doable. Um, it would be easier for two, but sometimes it's better for one because if one side is toxic and the other side is trying to do, then I mean you totally need to cut the toxicities out, and that is the way it is. But single parenting is, I mean, at this point in this day, it is what it is. Uh, Most people just gotta own it and step into it and do what they need to do in regards to, because the word single parent is not so much about the parent, but it's about the child or children. So yes, you're doing it by yourself, but you are still there. You still have the opportunity to do it and do it your best. I think illegitimacy is a word that's dangerous to throw out. I think because we, as black people, we are illegitimate. We came to this country. No, we didn't come. We were taken to this country as tools, considered tools, property, and all of the above that was meant for servitude. So that's the biggest illegitimacy that we are in and we are still in as black people in America, because we are trying to find our own way. Even though we come so far, we are still coming. And as we look at this society, we are at the 50-yard line. White America is basically at the other end zone, ready to start back again while we're just getting to the 50. So, like what's going on in ghettos, what's going on in different things of that, because anytime you have poverty, low income, low education, which education is first, anytime you have those factors right there, that's gonna bring on high drug usage, drinking, illicit sex. So these are the things that's birthed from those problems right there. We need to help this word illegitimacy. It's more of knowledge of self, community, our heritage, lineage, and what we have accomplished. That needs to be taught at the basic levels of just learning, bottom line learning, because single parents like I am, but single parents in the ghettos with no income, no resources, they're up against a lot. They're up against a lot of basically when they, if it is per se a single parent, I mean, you initially going into a system that you asking this, a lot of times is put on the young lady. A lot of times you ask this young lady to, uh, if you get any resources, you have to deny your man. Um, so the resources that is given, she's trying to take them just to survive. So in the survival mode, we're all in survival mode. Nobody tends to take the point of learning, educating, and that's totally natural because that's human nature. We're gonna try to survive regardless of what's going on. And a lot of times you miss the fine points. This is what's poured into our young people, and this is how young people see it. Because if they come from a, I won't say a broken home, but if they come from a home that is that has destructive ways, you see this creation and manifest.
Jamila, I'll take a stab at that. Um, you know, we forget that there is so much programming, negative programming, especially if we're talking about in African American communities, where there's negative programming that's happening. I think the number is something around 12,000 negative hours by the time you're 10 years old. Negative self images, negative images of what relationships are. You'll see that there has been a drastic change from 50, 60 years ago about roles, responsibilities. And so single parenting has um, always been a part of life. And in foreign countries, some cultures do it better than others, you know. So do I agree that a two-parent household is optimal? But the question is, if these two parents are parenting and existing in a way that is in a nurturing environment, a teachable environment, that's different. But if it's a toxic situation, maybe the idea of a two-parent household may not be the best thing at that time especially for the child. So, you know, getting back to this idea of programming, I think that in our music, in modern TV, uh, in movies, we have seen ourselves depicted in the worst light. And I think the biggest concern is that oftentimes life imitates art. So the visuals that are put out there, those suggestive materials that are put out there about who we are and how we're evolving, sometimes comes from what is actually produced in mainstream media. And we find ourselves in a 10, 20, 30-year cycle having to undo some of those things. I think now there's this huge rebellion about these negative images. I think your generation will probably be the ones that are actually fight it the hardest to challenge the establishments to say, no, this is who we are, and this is how we want to be portrayed. And I think that would change the global view of who we are as family. So it's not just this idea of, hey, you know, because you're blending two very different backgrounds, no matter, you know, where you come from. Your mate is not going to come from your household. So you're going to have to blend two totally different ideas and philosophies. And then sometimes you got to unpack how those things came to be. But we cannot look away from the suggestive materials that enter our subconsciousness and ultimately determine who we are when the cameras are not on, when people are not looking, and when we have to deal with one another. So
I agree with what Sheck has just stated. And also to just kind of add to that of what you were saying about, you know, within our single family household and teen pregnancy, we've also lost a sense of community, you know? So as we're looking at negative language and negativity of how it comes to the Black community and Black families, we've lost a sense of community, and it takes that village to help raise families. And that was even happening too in married households, single family households, to where you collectively were working together to make sure that children were being raised. You know, they were being um, in the community. If you saw a child that was doing something wrong, no matter what type of family or household that they came from, you corrected them. So we've lost that very much so sense of family and community within our own culture, to where I really do think that if we got back to some of that, that would even help in navigating and raising our children and our families in a more positive, productive manner. Well, I would say I don't think that it is. And the reason why I would say that is because, I mean, we're just living in different times, just like I just stated before about, you know, that community, that village. Then my mother was a single mother. So I spent quite a bit of time with my grandparents. And that was a two grandmother, grandfather in a household married. And just relationships were different, and how you look and live within that relationship and within that household was a totally different environment. The way they connected, it was more male dominated, male driven in those particular relationships in the 70s, in the 70s, 80s, and moving forward. Right now, you know, my grandmother did not work. Right now, you have in our relationships and in our household, you have both of the parents, the mother and the father, working outside of the house home. You're utilizing more outsourced resources like childcare to be able to assist in taking care of your children while you're out working. So I would say that it's a totally different type of way that we are raising our children and living and existing in our society, because it has totally evolved in a different way, living in this 20th century. But I do think that there are values that we were taught that we carry with us when it deals with relationships. And that's back to making sure that we're connecting, building that trust, having that communication, working together to make sure that your household is afloat and moving in the way that you would see that it would in a positive direction. So, Shep, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think oftentimes we actually romanticize the past and saying that these were just some very beautiful relationships and all this communication and all this stuff. But the truth is, you know, we can actually look very closely about how we as African Americans have really just started having relationships. You know, whenever you're able to go into a household and take a person out, demasculate, emasculate the male figure, separate the household for whatever reason, put in these structures, government housing sometimes, which is kind of turning over the apple cart of even that whole idea of leadership in the household. We sometimes we romanticize these ideas, and not to be, not to conflict what my wife has just said, but oftentimes the woman did work. She worked as sharecropper. She worked in different people's homes, folding clothes way back in the day. I mean, there was always this element. In fact, we really have to look at what really, really, really was going on through those days. For the African American woman, it was never the idea of just sitting home waiting for a man to bring home a check. It was never the idea of just being so well cared for finances that they were not shared economic responsibility. So sometimes we carry that narrative, but how often was that narrative really the case? The truth is, we are still working on making our relationships better, a better idea of what relationships are. This is a process that's still in work. So, yes, I would say the marriage rate was a lot higher. Yes, I would agree to that. That the phenomenon of having a single family household is probably more perpetuated now than then. We have a lot of issues in our households, in our communities that we just need to address, whether it was then and or now. But also, too, I wanted to say this. Um, some of those ideas about, in some of those older generations, the child was not the epicenter of the relationship. The child actually came along, you had 14 children, you had 12 children, you worked on a farm. The children were purposeful. And as we grew and as times changed and we got off the farm, got off of, some of these other things, you started having less children. And and when you had one or two, three or four, you're able to devote that time and energy. And a lot of times we said, okay, well, we're going to invest in the future of the generation, which of course is very important. But I think what we have stopped doing is actually making sure that who's nurtured in that relationship is also the mother and father, the husband.
So compared to when I was growing up, I really do feel like it's a decline. I feel like I feel like people get married today as a fad. It's cool today, it's not cool tomorrow. let me go on about my business. I believe growing up, we needed each other more. And now sometimes it's more of an option. The next person, not even just heterosexual marriages, but needing the next person is optional these days for a large part. I believe because it wasn't necessarily optional when I was growing up, that people, for one, they accepted who they were and what they were meant to do in a different way, meaning to be on this earth, to procreate, to go to work, to have a working relationship with your husband or your wife, just your spouse in general, because that was part of survival. Now, because so much technology, so many options, so work from home type options, the fact that um, a female or a male can have a baby without actually being with each other. No sex has to be involved. I think it's become a trend to where we get to decide if we want to be bothered, because now it's seen as a bother versus survival versus trying to build your legacy. People aren't necessarily concerned with building their legacy that include people. They're looking at building a legacy that is their name and their name alone. They're not looking for their children and their grandchildren and their grandchildren and that type of legacy. They're looking for one, not even having children because they see children as a burden and not an investment. And so it is very different from when I grew up. Everybody I knew growing up, for the most part, they were married and they stayed married till death. Even if they were sleeping in separate bedrooms, they stayed married until death. They were going to tough it out. They were going to make memories. They were going to share love. They were going to accept the family member that no one wanted to be bothered with. They weren't necessarily going to put grandma in the nursing home. It was multi-generational.
I think they work hand in hand. I think that this is the problem. Now I can speak on this is a large problem, in my opinion, in the black community, and I think that it goes all the way back to slavery. Um, as we come over here as a certain condition. First, let me go back to this point. Let me make this point. As white Europeans, other people came to our continent of Africa, they looked at us because we didn't worship the same God that they had as savages. Every other realm where the basis of Christian religion came into and they didn't believe what the basic Christian religion was started or quote unquote told from, they were looked upon as savages. Darker skinned people mostly had different beliefs and different processes of morals and religious. Now, and I'll say this. Now, coming to your question, morals and religion are hand in hand because most people develop their morals through religion. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the morality of what people do, what people say, it's based on religion. I mean, they might have cast religion to the side, but still, I think that they're saying there's no honor among thieves, but I mean, two thieves working together to rob the bank, evidently they got some cooperation going on to get that process accomplished. Religion, like I say, we as black people in America, we was given the Bible at first with not even the permission to read it. Then once we got permission from certain slaves that was hand pointed by our slave owners to teach us the Bible per what he read out of it, well, what the slave read was interpreted by the slave owner. So this process, because we in 2022 now, yes, everybody's smart, everybody's able to decipher this religion for themselves. Well, you got to look at 400 years. This is, we'll say, we'll go back 400 years. 400 years of what we had and what we had impressed upon us, even as we released. And we worked on this code and moral code of everybody else, the premise of we love everybody else unconditionally and not love ourselves, but this is the gratification when we get to heaven. But everybody else operates under saying that they still operate in a certain part of a religion, but everybody else operates, well, we gonna get ours as it is on earth. And we are the people that pretty much reflect what we have been taught through religion, and that tends to break down because that's not a working process. Everything must be built on facts, studies, and equations and solid process. Morality and religion, ain't none of that a solid process. Because what's moral to you what's your moral belief might be totally different from the other person's moral belief. And as you get into these divisions, then that's the problem what our community sits on. Because in the ghettos, in the hoods, or whatever, you got a black church just about on every corner. But the problem's still there. The poverty, the violence, and the immoral doings, all of that is still there, and churches are scattered anywhere in between. So something is a breakdown there. But it goes back to what I said earlier. If you practice true education of self, letting our people know the greatness that we are. The greatness our people are great in this country solely off of nobody else. We don't have to go to our ancestors across the water. We can start right here because we've had the fortitude to last up to this very day. The one point I wanted to make also, the moral and religious parts. Um, we are highly moved by these things, moral and religiously. Now we operate under this. So what tends to suffer is the people that are involved under this banner. Uh, the mother, if they have a child out of wedlock, the child is referred to as a bastard, and the mother under religious doctrines are oftentimes shamed for her moves and things that she has to do to try to provide for her child. And also the man kind of at times can get a pass. So morality and religion is unbalanced, and you got to have balance. Anything that can move forward and pick up momentum has to have balance. And a lot of times you can be suffer for certain things that you do as a mistake or because you just didn't know no better. Religion will crucify you, and that's how our court systems are built off religion.
I don't think it's religion based. I don't think it's a moral based issue. I just believe it's more policy based. The policies that came into play to encourage single, to encourage and support men not being in the home, to encourage and support the idea that we don't need everybody or men in the home. I believe that's I believe it totally stems from policies. The fact that men were told to um, or geared for actually sort of geared for um, vocational industries, and then all of a sudden women were geared for college and making us both think that the playing field is unlevel. That you can't marry a man who didn't go with a 4-year degree and a master's and work on a doctor. That you had to overlook the guy next door, although he's a good guy, although he's a great person, that's not good enough. I think all of the subliminal messages and policy have had a heavier influence on marriage and being together and raising children. First and foremost, I think we need to take race out of the equation for marriage among us. It is our marriage rates are not hinged on what other races are or aren't doing. We have decided that we want something that others have instead of focusing on what we have and taking pride in that, as well as continuing to walk in that. It's sort of like a horse-drawn carriage. The horses have blinders on. They can only see straight ahead. The only way they can look to the right or to the left is if they turn their head and focus in that direction. The horse will lead the carriage in the direction he or she is focused. The carriage driver is the only one that can pull on that rein for the focus to turn. We are the carriage drivers. If we want our focus to turn towards family, be more about family, to sort of regain what we feel we may have lost, we have to be the ones to do that. And I don't think race will burden us any more than it has in it, or help us with. That's a community issue we have to search for and do it. And only we can do that.
I'd like to take a stab at this. When it comes to race, I think that, and this is controversial to some people, the idea of integrating into a burning house that was actually said to Harry Belafonte from Martin Luther King weeks before he died. Just about a week or so before he was assassinated, not died, assassinated. The idea that integrating into a culture or assimilating into a culture that did not respect who we were as individuals, our contributions to society, and never in its architecture placed the African American in a light that was respected and enduring. So if those constructs are still alive today, which we know that they are still alive today, then that is a direct reflection on the need to, sometimes you got to pull it back to get it together. Sometimes you have to shake off some of those shackles of this idea of what it is to truly assimilate, to truly integrate, because those may not be beneficial for you and your family. If you look at a lot of other groups, whether they are Hispanic, whether they are Asian, whether they're the culture is intact. The culture protects the family. The culture sets the morality, sets the expectation. And so when you don't know your culture, when you don't know what is actually expected of you, then you always fall short because there is no bar to shoot for. There's nothing to aim for. The old saying is, you aim for nothing, you will hit it every time. So, we need to understand that there is an expectation, not in a selfish way, but a way that it actually produces results, not just for the individual, not just for the family, but for our entire culture. And you do that by making sure you have resources in your community. We all know that we spent $1.2 trillion, in the economy, buying stuff. I think the number is about $800 million just in liquor alone in Black communities. So even with those numbers, we had hospitals, we had banks, we had grocery stores, and we had businesses. And those things help insulate the family. You wonder why Arab Americans are not under the same attack as African Americans, even though they have been depicted as terrorists, falsely, in many cases depicted as terrorists, even though Hispanics has been labeled in a particular negative way. They're still not under the same attacks as African Americans, and so on and so forth. But when you control your neighborhood, when you control your community, you are insulated from political whims, and you also are tied to a country that you can get lending from and have economic power from without having to be involved, so heavily involved in some of the social constructs that African Americans are involved in.
I don't think it's much more to say after all that, Jimilia, but he's so right about, we've got to get back to rebuilding our own communities, and that will in tune help the family and help our culture as a whole.
First thing, we can educate ourselves in our communities, of ourselves, not what is traditional school education, but educate ourselves And and if it goes into traditional, that is tradition. But we need to ask for more of the education of ourselves as a people. The nuclear family is, if it's considered heterosexual, man and a woman, uh, and the word family is, what is the word family? If I pick a man, I pick a woman that really has a set goal that they believe in and they move it along in this process, are they not family? Are they willing, if they sacrifice, if she sacrificed for him, he sacrificed for her, they have a plan and a goal that they work to, that's family. Um, if they willing to commit, submit to each other, uh, put themselves in harm's way when it comes to that group, that's family. So, and as a child is born in that family, what that child will learn is true cooperation.
Um, Let me state again, thank you so much for taking time out to do this interview.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course. We really appreciate it.
Okay. So to hear your answers about this, I interviewed a single person and they had the not word for word what y'all just said, but they had a very similar outlook to it. So I think that's a very interesting comparison to make there. Um, as stated before, thank y'all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to do this interview with me. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this with me. I really appreciate it. And do you have anything that you would like to say on the end part? Just, some side bit of information or anything like that?
Well, thank you for inviting me, for having me to chat with you about this. I'm always interested in social issues. I'm always interested in young people, and I feel like your questions were thought provoking, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
As I conducted each interview and asked all of the participants each question, I got a lot of very insightful and very thoughtful answers. And I think each and every last one of the people that I interviewed had wonderful takes. And they're each all people that I learned from every single day. The project did not explicitly ask for the student's opinion. However, I did want to give mine about a couple of things that were on the list. So the first thing, in talking about cohabitation, single parenthood, and illegitimacy, I feel that those things originate from a lack of education, as some of my interviewees have said. They talked about the lack of education of ourselves, as in Black Americans in America, but I'm going to take it a step further and say lack of sexual education in the Black community and the lack of trying to destigmatize sexual conversations. I can speak for myself when I say that a lot of people did not receive the talk, or if they did, it was a talk laced with condescension and pretty much telling you that you should not do it, and not a what should you do if you do it, which leaves a lot of people left to figure it out on their own. And sometimes that means that they end up having a child, all because they did not know how to be safe about everything that they were going to go about doing. And that does not make it right, but at the same time, we all have to take our accountability in the part and making sure that we're discussing sexual education in a way that does not guilt trip anyone, and then also in a way that allows everyone to learn and learn honestly. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was whether or not this was a moral or religious issue. I think to peg it as a religious issue is kind of exclusive, because not everybody is religious, and just because someone's not religious does not mean that they have no morals. I think that we really need to learn how to differentiate between what we do and what we have expectations for other people to do. However, to answer the question, do I feel that it's a moral or a religious issue? I don't think it's either, because I think if you pulled majority of the Black community aside and talked to them about all of the things that we've talked about in these interviews, they would all say, like, this isn't right. It's not something that should be occurring, and it definitely should not be occurring as much as it is now, but it is. I feel that it's not a moral issue. I think everybody knows that these things are wrong for the most part. I think that our look at illegitimacy kinda needs to be worked on and tweaked just a little bit, because we consider illegitimacy in the same way white people consider illegitimacy, which is the fact that your mother and your father were not married, so therefore you're illegitimate, aka you're a bastard. Which I feel like we really need to have the conversation, and we really need to have the talk that just because people aren't married doesn't mean that they're not seriously committed to each other. We need to learn how to accept that marriage is not for everyone. As one of my interviewees previously stated, there is no one way to do everything. There's no one way to do anything. So we definitely need to have that conversation that marriage is not for everyone, and we need to learn to respect that without making it seem like it's wrong. And we need to simply get away from the white way of doing things and learning for ourselves what each of these things means to our community as our community. I do believe that, as they've said, knowledge of self is so important, especially when you talk about knowing. Knowledge of self is important, because if you don't know who you are, if you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going. So you could possibly be going back to that exact same place. So I believe that knowledge of self is important, so that we all know who we are, so we can have a pride in ourselves. And from that pride in ourselves, we will learn how to execute our everyday lives and everyday interactions with each other. I do believe that it is unrealistic to expect a people who were forcefully transplanted from one place to another. I think that it is very narrow-minded to expect that those people would have everything together in a relatively short time, especially when we think about the fact that white America has been here for a minute, for a hot minute, and Black Americans enslaved Africans, were brought here and then just forced to kind of figure it out. And then not only that, but to assimilate into white culture. And that's also another thing that we struggle with is the assimilation, because on the one hand, if you assimilate, then you're a sellout. If you assimilate, then you can't possibly love yourself and your culture. But on the other hand, if you don't assimilate, then you're ghetto and unprofessional. So I do believe that we definitely all have to come together and have a formal thought about what we believe.
Yes, and this is to your professor. She's great. Jamila's great. Give her 100% on this video. If there's anything else we need to do, make sure you reach out. But this young lady is going places, and I would greatly appreciate from my household to your office that you make sure this young lady is the best at whatever she does, and give her all the tools and resources that she needs. So, shameless plug.
That's right. Great work. Keep it up.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
I am so proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
You've done a great job. You're doing a great job. Everybody that's in my extended family that loves you too, we know you're doing a great job, and we're so proud of you. And keep up the good work. I know there's hard times and gonna be rough times, but you do have a community that's backing you. And know that we love you as well as I love you, and that you know I'm so impressed. Um, you got another person that's coming behind you in your footsteps, and you've been a great example for them. So um, that ain't, and that will probably, just as I tell you that, I tell you any of your counterparts, if they're trying to do the right thing, it's a community that's supporting them too. We believe in our young people. I don't care what the media, what everybody says, that young people this, young people that. You are just basically what we put out there. If people take the notion of young people don't do this, well, we the same, because y'all didn't get it from nowhere. And that, I mean that you all are doing a great job. You keep up the good work hard. Remember us, meaning our community, our people, and I. You got a lot of pages and chapters in your book, and I know it's gonna end in a great storyline, no matter what. So, great job.
All right.
Thank you for the interview. Thank you. I'm honored.